Well, the students are taking an industrial engineering technology core class. They're mixed in with students with taking engineering 1. Some of them are taking the industrial engineering technology capstone course. We have them all mixed with each other. And so through the CT program, there is a set of benchmarks and standards we need to meet, in addition to the GLOs, the general learner outcomes, as well as school-wide, what's the school-wide student learning objective that they want all teachers to focus on. And for this year, it's persuasive writing. So we look at those things, and we're a program where we build robots and we participate in competitions. And so for me, I try to do it the reverse. I mean, we try to do it somewhat different, where we look at the competition first and see how can we incorporate all of the things that we need to input into the whole competition experience that shows that students are getting something out of the program, the learning experience. And so I asked the students, what do you want to get out of this competition? And of course they say, well, we want to win. That's great, but what does it mean to win? I mean, what does it take? Let's define what winning is. Let's go over those big ideas. And so they say things like, we got to be responsible. We got to be proactive. We got to keep working at our design. We have to problem solve. We have to go through this whole engineering design process, which is an iteration of ideas and putting something down on paper, building it, testing it out to see if it works. If it doesn't, then of course we have to go back and relook at the things that didn't work and try to improve on those areas, and overall hopefully we make progress. I think the hardest part for our students in following this curriculum is that a lot of times, with those buzzwords, they understand what problem solving is. I mean, they understand what the word means, but it's living it. And the hardest part is when it doesn't work. And so the students get frustrated. And then, I can't fall back on their curriculum or a certain standard and say, well, you got to follow this, and this is what's going to make it better. Sometimes it's the other intangibles. It's not giving up. It's teaching kids that if there's a problem, you do whatever it takes. You get whatever resources you need. You work with your teammates. You talk to your mentors and get input, and hopefully you can come up with a better solution. I think one of the biggest problems with our students, I think a lot of students, is they complain about, well, the teachers are not teaching. Well, what do you mean by we're not teaching? Well, they want the answers. They want us to tell them what either the answer is, or they want us to point them in the direction that gives them the answer. But for our curriculum, we don't do that. It's all inquiry-based. It's all design process. We want them to figure it out. And so my job as a teacher, as far as the materials go, is I can provide all the robot parts and everything else. But I'm not going to give them a prescribed step 1, do this, step 2, do that, and so on. Instead, present the big ideas and have them focus on the process, and through that process figure out for themselves what I need to do to be successful.
And what is it, can you maybe describe some of the instructional materials that you might see in the classroom setting?
Okay, so when we participate in this competition, there's 3 main parts. One is the actual building of the robots, and they go through that engineering design process. So we give them a chart, basically, and we have them follow through certain steps. The biggest part, which is the other part, is they got to document what it is that they're learning. So there's self-reflection, meaning that the students create daily journal entries. They can put pictures on there to help describe what they're doing. If they're doing a CAD drawing to develop and create a certain part, they can include that as well. But in the end, besides describing what they're doing, it's also reflecting on what worked, what didn't work, and putting all of that down into a notebook. In addition to that, we have rubrics that the competition has already developed and presented to us. And what that does is it grades your engineering design notebook to ensure that the kids followed the process and to ensure that they went through those necessary steps and to authenticate that this is their work, as opposed to, maybe a mentor or a teacher or another adult just giving them the answer and then building from there. We don't want them to just build from a blueprint. We want them to develop that and document that process. That's another part. And then the third part is there's actually a rubric for presenting their project. And so at every competition, there's judges, and they interview our students, and they ask them questions about how they develop what they developed. And so those presentation rubrics look at their writing. It looks at how they communicate their ideas, and so on. So again, not just building, but also documenting what they're doing, and then focusing on a presentation that they do to a panel of judges.
And that was cool to see the other students documenting with the video cameras during that particular lesson.
Right.
Yeah,
We actually videotape ourselves so that students can see. Sometimes, unless they see themselves on camera, they can't see what areas they could improve on, or or maybe even see the good things that they're doing and building on that. So we think that by doing that, it's another type of self-reflection. And we want our kids to self-reflect as they focus on those areas that the rubric calls for. Well, that's easy. We don't want to recreate the wheel. We're going to go with the rubrics that everyone else is working with. We are doing a competition, and so I think there's nothing wrong with using what's there. Maybe we could tweak some things a little, and we do. But basically, we start with that framework and then look at maybe what our kids need. A lot of our kids have a hard time doing public speaking, so maybe we would spend more time on that and have a greater emphasis on their grades through the reading and writing and the presentation part. But basically, we take the materials that was already developed by another group of individuals. Well, I think it's real life. Learning doesn't take place, in an hour and a half class, 90-minute class, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. When kids get out there, it could be 24 hours in one day. You could have the next day off. You have a presentation to do 2 days from now. It's not just spending 1 hour each day on it. You might spend more time on it. And so it's great because it teaches our kids that there's deadlines and that they got to figure out how much time they need to spend, how much time they need. They got to account for things that may go wrong and figure out for themselves through self-directed learning what they need to do in order to be successful. And so we're in a setting where there's a big block of time. It's in a setting where kids are working with each other, where teamwork is critical. And it's not where I'm just standing there the whole time just telling them what to do. I'm on the side as a facilitator, and the teachers are actually the students themselves driving what they need to do in order to be successful. I think, as I mentioned before, I think the materials that we're using for the curriculum is okay. If anything, if our kids have any weak areas, maybe spend more time on certain parts as opposed to spending an equal amount of time on all the different parts that maybe some other schools might do. But you know, we know our kids best. We understand our community. We understand you know, what our kids need. And so we want to focus on the areas that they're having a harder time on, and just basically just spending more time on those parts. Yeah. Well, we're not going to be successful at a competition if it's not relevant for students. And so in terms of relevance, I think it goes hand in hand with rigor. And I think the more complex, rigorous tasks you challenge your students, I think it helps make it more relevant for them, because they understand that they got to work pretty hard in order for them to be successful. Relevant in the sense that every day we basically problem solve every day in our daily lives. And there's going to be times when things are tough, and we don't want our kids to just give up or avoid challenges. We want them to tackle it the best they can. And so I think this project is very relevant because it forces our kids to do that. And it's in a dynamic setting, just like how everyday life is. Yeah.